All right, good morning. It's Friday, March 6th. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 881 days old, and the war within the war against the Islamic Republic is now 1 week old. Once again, the Middle East is perhaps one of the only places in the world where wars break out in the middle of wars. And once again, I'm your host, Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back yet again to the FDD Morning Brief. All right, we've got total air superiority or near total air superiority, depending on who you talk to, but the air defenses of the Islamic Republic are down, if not completely out. We're watching an intensification of strikes, both by the United States and Israel. The regime in Iran is getting hammered, wave after wave of military strikes. This is not looking good for the Islamic Republic right now. But let me just say, the launches are down. We're hearing that something like they're down 80%, those missile launchers. That's great. That means the Israelis have taken out a huge number of the missiles. They've gone after the launchers and reduced them by at least 50%, maybe 60, maybe 70, depending on who you talk to. But let's just acknowledge something. The regime is still able to fire. They're still squeezing off missile shots at Israel, at the Arab world. They're landing their punches even as they are pinned down. Meanwhile, Dahia, the stronghold of Hezbollah in Beirut, has gotten absolutely hammered. The Israelis have unleashed on the core infrastructure of Hezbollah. This has prompted something like 500,000 people to flee the area. This comes as the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran, has been banned by the government of Lebanon. This comes after the government of Lebanon has declared that Hezbollah's military activities are unlawful. This is potentially an alignment of interest between the United States, Israel, and the government of Lebanon. That would be a good thing if we're all on the same page. But in the meantime, drone strikes continue in Israel, including one that apparently just landed in northern Israel just a few minutes before we started this program. The Hezbollah is layering rocket fire onto Iranian launches. Apparently, a couple of minutes after they identify a launch out of Iran, we're seeing Hezbollah try to add to the chaos in the skies over Israel. Now, beyond that, with the Iranian regime firing all around the region, what we're actually hearing right now is that 11 countries have been hit by Iranian missile fire and drone fire. The breakdown of that is very interesting. 60% against Arab states and 40% against Israel, give or take. The Arab states continue to shoot down Iranian projectiles. The UAE, Saudi, Qatar, Kuwait, they've all announced that they've been shooting down these projectiles, but some of them are actually also sustaining strikes. There was a big one in Bahrain. Babco, the oil refinery, got hit, major explosion, rattling oil markets. You get a sense of the chaos, folks. One interesting country that got hit, Azerbaijan, announced that it may join the war effort. That would be interesting, creating some kind of a coalition, because right now we don't really see one, at least not overtly. According to the Washington Post, and we're going to talk about this momentarily, Russia may be providing intelligence to Iran to target U.S. forces. We're going to talk about what that means as we talk about the axis of aggressors. Mujtaba Khamenei, the son of the now dead supreme leader, was at one point seen to be the front runner for the next supreme leader. Right now, he is polling 50% or under on Polymarket. People are betting on this, folks, and it's kind of wild to watch. Finally, there is confusion surrounding the Kurds and whatever role they may play. The Iranian people are not necessarily happy about a Kurdish intervention. That was reported initially by Fox News. Then it was retracted. It was revised. It does seem like there are still Kurdish factions that are interested or tempted or being talked to by the United States to enter into the fray. But the Persian people, the Iranian people, may not like the idea of having minorities, sectarian groups coming in and intervening in a conflict that they believe is theirs. That is our roundup. It's now time for me to bring on two special guests to this SITREP edition of the FDD Morning Brief. We're going to bring on Brad Bowman, who is the director of our center, our senior director of our Center on Military and Political Power. And we're also going to bring on Jonathan Conricus, who is a senior fellow here at FDD and a former spokesman for the IDF. Both of these guys, you've seen them on the program in the past. They are, of course, repeat offenders. So let's bring them on now and let's get into a deeper discussion. All right. Welcome, gentlemen. Brad, I want to start with you, and I just want to ask you for your, I guess, if you can summarize what the BDA is, the battle damage assessment of the Islamic Republic, according to the Pentagon. What are we hearing?
Yeah, great. Thanks, John. It's a pleasure to be with you and also with my friend and colleague, Jonathan. Yeah, here's the bottom line. For those of you who may have missed the update from U.S. Central Command headquarters in Florida yesterday afternoon, here's some highlights from that with a little commentary from me. So in the first 24 hours of this war, we saw a large quantity of ballistic missiles and drones launched. But if you compare those amounts to what we saw in the 24 hours as of yesterday afternoon, the commander of U.S. Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper, who I did interviewed here at FDD a few years back, said that the quantity of ballistic missiles being launched by Iran have declined by 90%, 90%, and the quantity of drones has declined by 83%. So in the early days, our Center on Military and Political Power was noting that essentially what we had here was a race between Iran launching particularly ballistic missiles and our ability to degrade our actions to degrade their ability to do that. What those numbers represent, which we highlighted in a Long War Journal piece a day or two ago, reflects numerous things, including what the Israelis did during the 12-day war. The first 11 of the 12-day war is degrading Iran's ballistic missile capabilities. It obviously reflects what we've done in this recent war. And it also reflects the fact that we are severely damaging Iran's command and control and communications abilities. So in other words, the ability for headquarters, which in many cases don't exist, to communicate with their lower units. And we're actually seeing examples when you look at some of the satellite imagery where you have Iranians literally just abandoning what appear to be fully functional mobile launchers in some cases. In other words, they know that we have regional and soon to be countrywide in the next few days air dominance, we being the United States and Israel, and that we're going to be able to hit anything at will as many times as we want. And that includes bombers. And so they said we've had just in the last 24 hours or so, we've had B-2s of Midnight Hammer fame, basically conducting dropping dozens of penetrating bombs focused on a hardened ballistic missile targets. So as was said in the 12-day war, this is like playing soccer or football, depending on your persuasion, against an opponent that doesn't have a goalie. So that's a good place. And then just so the ballistic missiles, that's an update on that. That's good news. I think that's going to continue to be good news. I continue to be concerned about drones. I'm happy to see Ukraine offering assistance. Obviously, they're the world's leading experts on counter drone, right up there with the Israelis being quite strong. We have a lot to learn from both. We also saw in the briefing yesterday afternoon that Admiral Cooper said more than 30. That's an increase from President Trump's number. That's how quickly we're sinking them. 30 Iranian ships have been sunk or destroyed. They have a drone carrier. Think of this as like an aircraft carrier from World War II. It's about that size that is used to launch drones. As of the briefing yesterday afternoon, that was on fire and is now destroyed. And then lastly, obviously anything that's left of the nuclear program is going to be targeted. So the bottom line is, I would say the three main goals here: ballistic missiles, destroy their Navy, destroy their nuclear program, known sites. We are on track to accomplish that from a military perspective. So, and I think what's making all this possible is the incredible years and even decades long planning between the United States and Israel, our ability to operate together. From a military perspective, this is quite impressive. It's extraordinary, frankly.
Great summary. And I want to get to that in a minute about the integration. But if you can first, I mean, I'm trying to get my head wrapped around the Iranian strategy of attacking more Gulf states and surrounding Muslim states, potentially drawing them into this conflict while, of course, hitting Israel. There appears to be a strategy of maybe trying to erode the missile defense of these countries. Is that the long and short of it, or is there something bigger that you assess that's going on here as you watch these? I mean, it's an onslaught, right? You look at these Arab states; they're not ready for this. They're not used to it. We're not talking about countries like Israel that have been doing this for years, so they're pretty rattled, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, all three of us and are longtime Middle East watchers, and it's my view, at risk of oversimplifying a little bit, that the essential Iranian strategy since 1979 is to try to divide and conquer, and to dupe the region into believing that Israel was the main, excuse me, was the main threat, and to try to attack others via terror proxies while avoiding the counterpunches and consequences. That the veil is off. We all know that's a joke, and that's why the Abraham Accords was so great, because it basically demonstrated what a lie that was. And somewhere along the line, Iran made the decision to attack Arab neighbors. Hopefully, I think by trying to convince America's Gulf partners to try to divide them from what we were doing. But actually, the opposite happened. Admiral Brad Cooper said yesterday afternoon that 12 countries have been attacked. 12. Not all of those are Arab Gulf partners, but 12. And so what's happened is it's actually pushed our Gulf partners closer to us. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say we're now seeing a American, Israeli, and Arab coalition developing, which is exactly the opposite of what they intended. And then just last comment is that let me just highlight that the Iranians have been increasing the quantity of their ballistic missile launches. It was 120 in April 2024. It was 200 in October 2024. Roughly 550 during the 12-day war. That's in 12 days. And in this war, they launched about that amount in half as much time. So anyone sitting in the United States who would want to say the ballistic missile argument is a joke, they don't know what they're talking about. And one of the reasons they've been able to build that is because of assistance from China with sodium perchlorate shipments.
All right. So great segue to the question of axis of aggressors. We know you love these guys. Well, you probably don't love them, but you've been focusing on them. You're writing a book about it. There was this story that just came out in the Post today that I mentioned at the top of the show, that the Russians are providing intel to the Iranians. This is part of a broader infrastructure that you've been tracking. Tell us just for a minute about that.
Yeah. So I highly recommend everyone look at the Washington Post reporting this morning. They're saying Russia is providing Iran with targeting information to attack American forces in the Middle East. That's the reporting. Holy cow. If that's surprising, then you pay more attention, because in last year, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane, said that China, Russia, Iran, North Korea are conducting unprecedented cooperation across all domains of power. And let me give you a few examples. Iran has received from China, as I said, sodium perchlorate for its ballistic missiles, dual use inputs for its defense industrial base, and full military access to the Bedou navigation system. From Russia, Iran has received satellite launch assistance. They've received the Yak-130 trainers, which I applaud the Israelis for just doing the first air-to-air kill with F-35s. And they've also received tactical U.S. missile systems from Russia to study them and replicate them. And from North Korea, they received long-time assistance. And this news in this morning, the Washington Post, is just the latest. Let me remind everyone that in 2023, there was solid reporting, that Russia and Iran were working together to target and kill American forces in Syria so that they could try to get American forces to withdraw from Syria, which we've been doing. And then lastly, in 2024, there was reporting that Russia provided, via Iran and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, intelligence to the Houthis to target shipping. So it is not an exaggeration to say that we're seeing growing and unprecedented cooperation across all domains of power between China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And while this threat from Iran was not imminent in terms of days or weeks, that was creating growing capability, capacity, resilience, and readiness for all four members of the Axis, making them more capable than they would have been otherwise in their ongoing or prospective spheres of aggression, John.
All right. Well, I think what we're watching right now then only reinforces the work that you've been doing over these months. It's been a heck of a journey, and obviously culminating with this war. Jonathan, I want to turn to you now. I want to just ask you first about Israel's assessment of how the war in Iran is going. Most of what I hear is actually downright giddiness from folks in Israel about the progress that's been made. But there have been those that have said, well, yes, it's going well, but where do you fall on things? I mean, is it going as well as Israel could have expected?
Hi, Jonathan and Brad. Always good to be here, of course. In short, I would say yes, it's going as good or perhaps even better than we would have expected. When I sum everything together, the amount of casualties that we've sustained, the amount of damage that we, together with the U.S., have been able to inflict on Iran, and the level of, and how things are positioned now, like when you assess their capabilities, their strategic alliances, their economics, their logistics, their ability to supply themselves, and their ability to continue fighting versus ours as in Israel and the US together, it's an assessment that is a very good one. And there's a lot of freedom of movement here. There's enough diplomatic space to maneuver. And militarily speaking, things are proceeding well. I would say that our enemies are doing mistakes and very odd decisions that I think will be counterproductive. You spoke about the fact that they've lashed out and are now striking, or Brad mentioned this, 11 or 12 different countries in the region. I think something that is backfiring and will backfire against Iran. The whole axis of proxy organizations, the vaunted ring of fire that the Iranians spent around 30 years building around Israel, is very hardly significant and will be dealt with. So the only thing that that brings me or brings me to pause and slight concern is how disciplined will we be in Israel. There's actually two issues. One is, how disciplined will we be in Israel to actually pursue our strategic goals and not allow ourselves to get carried away and go one bridge too far, as in overreaching and trying to do things that are outside of our capabilities, outside of our reach, outside of our real interests, just because it appears that we can. Nation building, appointing leaders, meddling in demographics, all of those are in the category of things that, in my perspective, are a bit beyond our size, and we would be wise not to do it. And that's one thing that concerns me, because usually when you're successful and when you're getting your way in war, you can have that tendency of wanting to do more, even if it doesn't really suit your real strategic goals, or it's not something that you really have the capacity to do. So that's one thing that concerns me. Second thing that concerns me is the issue of, when will we find the first fork in the road where we have a varying, where there's daylight between American goals and perspectives on the war and Israeli goals and perspectives on the war, which I think are different. Israel, I think pretty clearly wants to bring down the Iranian regime by one way or another. The end game, strategically speaking, not only by military action, but by other tools afterwards. We want that regime to be gone. I'm not sure that the US is as focused on that as we are. And somewhere along the line, maybe in a week, maybe 2, maybe 3, I don't know when, that question will come up. And then that'll be an important fork in the road. And I am a bit concerned, because what we've seen so far from this administration, alongside tremendous cooperation, political support, and steadfastness, sharing intel, brave leadership, and all of the things that we have so rightfully been praising President Trump and his excellent team for, there's also this, binary nature of, there's this way or the highway. And we can, like the Gaza situation. So we can find ourselves in a place that I think wouldn't be ideal. But until we get there, and hopefully we will get there on even keel and having communicated things better. But those two topics aside, military progress, diplomatic progress, our enemies are making mistakes, and we are in a position to take advantage of them in order to pursue our goals.
Okay, I want to talk to you about overreach and enemies making mistakes. I mean, Hezbollah made big mistakes, right? They fired rockets after having violated the ceasefire 500 something times, and Israel decided to take advantage of the error that they made. And now you're watching Israel hammer Dahia and a lot of infrastructure of Hezbollah across Lebanon. I mean, I'm looking right now on my screen. It's channel 11 Israel, just over this screen, my computer screen. And it says that Israel is attacking Hezbollah and Iran at the same time. Does this feel like an overreach to you? I mean, look, I want to hear your battle assessment of what's going on with Hezbollah, but are you concerned that Israel has opened up a second front and it's making the skies over Israel more crowded in terms of missiles and drones that are coming in and from different trajectories? Is this a concern for you at all?
No, I think what Hezbollah did was exactly what Israel wanted Hezbollah to do, and it has opened the way diplomatically and militarily for Israel to now execute plans that have existed for many months, basically since the ceasefire came into effect a year and some 2 months ago. Israel has been itching to do this. Why so? Because in Lebanon we have unfinished business. Hezbollah is still there. Hezbollah still has weapons. Hezbollah is still a very important and potent military force. And Israel wants that not to be the reality. So for months and months, Israel degraded Hezbollah capabilities, but all of that was within the framework, below the threshold, within the framework of the ceasefire mechanism, and with either approval or at least tacit approval of the Americans of what Israel was doing, but we couldn't do nearly everything that we wanted. Now, when Hezbollah opened fire on Israel, when they opened that front against Israel and are fired rockets at Haifa and are trying to penetrate into northern Israel, firing rockets and missiles at northern Israel, that's basically all Israel needed in order to say, okay, now we're going to tidy up. We are going to strike hard and deep. Everywhere that Hezbollah has significant infrastructure, we are going to strike. The Bekaa area, Dahya, and other centers of gravity of Hezbollah are now all targets. We've seen a significant movement of population, Lebanese civilians that were called upon to move out of a concern for their safety by the IDF Arabic spokesperson. They did so, have moved, and as you said very correctly, the IDF is striking and delivering a lot of ordnance. I think it is well within the capabilities of the Israeli Air Force to conduct these simultaneous operations against Iran and against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And what I think is the most important part is actually happening now with regards to Hezbollah is the French proposal that has now been put on the table, which basically says that Hezbollah has 2 weeks to agree to a ceasefire, to agree to a ceasefire now, and within 2 weeks, allow the Lebanese armed forces to move into the Dahya and for the Lebanese armed forces to take control of all their weapons and all their facilities. Hezbollah has already answered that they are not interested and they will never give up their weapons and they will resist any attempt to do so. But I think this political process, the state of Lebanon, with international backing, American, and we see a lot of French diplomatic involvement, that is the way forward. I see that as the best option for stability in the future, and I think it is within reach if Israel is able to degrade Hezbollah sufficiently militarily. Political and diplomatic domestic pressure applied by the Lebanese government and by the other ethnic groups in Lebanon, and of course with U.S. and French and perhaps Saudi support from the outside. So no, I don't think it's an overreach, and I think Israel will try to separate and distinguish between these two fronts. Whatever happens in Iran will much more be decided by the U.S. When the U.S. says we're done, then I'm sure they will tell Israel that we're done as well. In Lebanon, that's a different story. And we will try, I think, to pursue the goals here and really tidy up with Hezbollah once and for all.
Yeah, I tie up those loose ends. I know that that's been sort of a lingering challenge. And I understand the Israeli, how eager Israelis are to finish that file. Last question for you, and then one more for Brad here. The regional dynamic. I mean, you sort of mentioned that you didn't think that it was a real threat that these Arab states are sustaining fire. I don't know how much they agree, but I guess my question to you right now is, do you see that realignment happening? Do you think that this is pushing the Arabs into the arms of Israel? Are you getting signs of that right now? Where do you see things moving in terms of, widening the Abraham Accords or whatever happens as a result of this war? It does seem like Israel and the Arabs are fighting together with the United States.
It does seem like that, not because the Arabs wanted to, because they've been forced to. I think it's a bit premature, and I don't have a good assessment yet. I see some hesitance from the Arabs to actually, take arms and defend themselves, which is what we've become accustomed to with, Gulf states. They're defending themselves, some better than others. Some have, invested money in it before and have proficient air defense systems like the Emirates, and I'm happy that they're able to do that and defend their population and infrastructure. I'm not entirely sure that it will happen, but I think in any case, whether or not this blooms into an expansion of the Abraham Accords, which it might, it's nevertheless a much better situation than having a powerful and dominating Iranian regime and Arab countries that are either cheerleading for Iran out of fear and cowardice, or outwardly just hostile towards Israel. And currently they have moved from that space because the Iranians have attacked them. And I think that's a positive thing. That's a first development in the right direction. I think we'll have to be patient and see where this goes. My comment about regional was about the proxies, that the proxies are not bringing their weight here, and that they're not really as influential as we thought that they would be. Arab states defending themselves, that's good. It's interesting, to see what the Iranians so far are getting away with, hitting a NATO member, Turkey, hitting a member state of the European Union, and hitting a Shiite Muslim country, Azerbaijan. It is quite fascinating, and I cannot really understand the thinking of the Iranians, what they think they would achieve by this. But just like in sports, when you see your adversary or your enemy do mistakes, by no means don't interfere. Allow them to do those mistakes, and then use them in order to achieve your goals. And I think that's in general what the U.S. and Israel are doing with regards to Iran.
Fully agree. All right, Brad, I want to just one more question for you. You, for many years, have been advocating for closer U.S. Israel military cooperation, technological development of weapons together. The exercises that we've seen regionally and the integration of Israel and the United States. So all of that is now coming to fruition right now. We're watching the Israelis fully integrated with the American operation. How complicated is this, and how amazing is it for you to watch?
John, it's extraordinary. I've done this for a while, like all of us, and I have called for increased security cooperation, a term that encompasses all kinds of things, including selling American weapons so that they can be operating the same equipment as us, and that we can train together, conducting exercises, intelligence planning, coordination, all those sorts of things. And when there is no conflict or war, those kind of don't sound sexy and boring, and people kind of go to sleep. But it's in moments like this that you realize that kind of hard work, that spade work behind the scenes when no one's paying attention, pays off. And I also just remind everyone that in the National Defense Strategy that the Trump administration published recently, they only called one ally in the world a model ally, and that was Israel. And they said it twice in the National Defense Strategy. And the reason they said it was because Israel has extraordinary military capabilities, and in other words, it has big muscles, and it's willing to throw a punch, not just any punch, punches against one of America's 4 top nation state adversaries. So when the bullies come around the corner, as I always say, it's good to have friends. It's even better to have friends with big muscles. It's really good to have friends with big muscles who know how to throw punches. And one of the reasons why this war is going so well, I don't want to over or understate this, is because of what Israel did during the 12-day war, and also what they're doing right now. When you look at the number of attacks being conducted by Israel, and you compare that to the size of their Air Force and their capabilities compared to ours, they are carrying more than their fair share of the weight. And if, I'm a former Army aviator, used to fly Blackhawks. The airspace over Iran is quite busy right now. And the coordination and planning required to deconflict aircraft, which are firing missiles and dropping bombs and electronic warfare, it's just breathtaking. It's breathtaking. And so this is where having a partner like this really pays off for Americans. But let me just end by saying that I do think there's some tough days ahead. I'm very positive about the military operations. I do agree with Jonathan that we need to bring some humility about the path forward, and destroying their Navy, seriously degrading their ballistic missile program, and destroying what less their nuclear program. That's doable, and it's going to be largely done in the next few weeks. But regime change is a whole nother thing. And I agree with Jonathan that there may be a coming divergence between the United States and Israel. And we just have to be careful here on that to not overreach, because if this goes south fast, that's going to affect the views of many Americans about our relationship with Israel. And as someone who believes Israel is our best friend in the region as an asset, we have to be very careful to try to navigate this together, or the long-term grand strategic implications could be quite negative.
All right. Important words of warning from both of you, even as I hear that optimism that you've expressed about this war. Folks, we've gone a little bit longer than normal today. I want to thank Jonathan and Brad for joining us. This has been a terrific conversation. And with that, folks, this Friday episode of the FDD Morning Brief will conclude. But the war with the regime in Iran may just be getting started, as you've heard. So if you want to stay up to date on the latest, be sure to check out our website, check out that social media content, and definitely follow our podcast. I'm talking here about the Iran Breakdown, hosted by CEO Mark Dubowitz. We're talking about Foreign Policy, hosted by FDD Supreme Leader Cliff May. Obviously, keep watching this one. You should watch Generation Jihad, hosted by my friend and colleague Bill Roggio from the Long War Journal. And yes, you can always head over to fdd.org/invest to make a highly appreciated tax-deductible donation so we can keep on doing all of this stuff, especially during times like these. Tune in Monday for another episode of your favorite morning show. We're just not quitting. And we're keeping a close eye on Iran, the Gulf, and every other front. The headlines don't stop, and neither do we. So take the weekend off. We'll update you on Monday. Until then, I'm Jonathan Schanzer, signing off for FDD.